Okay, I'm live.
Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this session hosted by Edgware United Synagogue. Tonight, World Jewish Relief will let us know how it has responded to the crisis in Ukraine almost 3 weeks after hostilities commenced. It's the first time I can say that I hoped we would never have to put on an event like this, but we're currently living through a time without comparison since World War II, and one which we believed we would never experience in our lifetime. But 20 days ago, we were all taken by surprise by the Russian invasion of Ukraine and the havoc and destruction it has caused. Fortunately, we have an organization within our community which can react at speed to this humanitarian crisis, and that is World Jewish Relief. It has worked in Ukraine since 1989, and just in the past year has supported 13,000 people across the country before hostilities started. As far back as 2016, they gave a presentation at Edgware on the Jews of the Ukraine, and we heard about the wonderful work they were doing there to help the Jewish community. We all anticipated that there would be steady progress and that their projects would increasingly help the elderly, the poor, the sick, and the unemployed. Now they have to assist the whole community, all of which is under threat, and I called on World Jewish Relief Vice President Linda Rosenblatt to address us. She has been deeply involved with the work of the organization for many years and will talk about the work of World Jewish Relief in Ukraine and in neighboring countries, give us an update on their response to the UK government's Homes for Ukraine scheme announced this week, and other updates, including what we can do to assist. After she has spoken, there will be a Q&A session. You're all familiar with the Zoom chat facility and how to make comments on YouTube, and you can also raise your virtual hand if you wish to comment or ask a question.
Thank you, Spencer, and thank you to Edgware Synagogue for hosting this evening's event, and to all of you who've joined us for this special briefing on Ukraine, with particular reference to the role of World Jewish Relief in providing humanitarian assistance during this unprecedented crisis. As Spencer has kindly introduced me, my name is Linda Rosenblatt, and I'm the Life Vice Chair of World Jewish Relief, an organization that I'm really proud to have been involved with for over 30 years. Like many of you watching, I'm a child of refugees and have a particular empathy with the daily images on our screens of mothers and children fleeing their homes in fear for their lives with the barest of possessions. My own mother was a refugee for 4 years, fleeing from Germany to Belgium to France, and then finally to Italy, where she found refuge in a convent in Rome. And my father, fortunately, found sanctuary in the United Kingdom just a couple of weeks before World War II broke out. I'm sure you've all been following the tragic events closely on TV, on the radio, and on social media. You will have been horrified, like I am, by pictures of the airstrikes, the flattening of major cities, the barbaric siege of Mariupol, and the desecration of the Holocaust Memorial Site at Babi Yar. The idea that this aggression could be called denazification is beyond repellent. And then there are the people, crowded onto trains, dashing for borders, carrying infants in their arms, suddenly finding themselves called either refugees or soldiers. The refugees were, until 3 weeks ago, office workers and restaurateurs, gym instructors and nursery school teachers, ordinary people. The soldiers were the IT guys, the brothers, the best man at a wedding, the artist and the sound engineer. This is what it looks like to have your life turned upside down and a generic title thrust upon you. So the purpose of this evening is not to discuss the political or military aspects of this war, but I hope that by the end of the evening, you'll have a better understanding of what World Jewish Relief, of its involvement in Ukraine, and how we are so well placed to provide a personalized, direct approach to an array of partners with whom we've been working, as Spencer said, for so many years, both in the country, in Ukraine, and on its borders. The feeling of futility can be overwhelming at a time of crisis like this one. And I hope this briefing will allow you to feel you're not just bystanders. You're all here to learn, to listen, and hopefully to raise some money and to feel a part of what is happening. World Jewish Relief's involvement in Ukraine started after the fall of communism in the early 1990s. And it was around that time that I paid my first visit to the country, to the town of Lviv. Now, it was Lvov then, and in earlier life, it was Lemberg, to see how we could help the impoverished elderly Jews, many of whom were Holocaust survivors. We set up welfare centres, cheseds, to provide home care help, food parcels and medical care. We provided vulnerable families, mostly single mothers and children, with much needed support. And over the years, our involvement grew. We built 3 Jewish community centres in towns that most people hadn't at the time heard of. Today, they are sadly instantly recognisable: Kharkiv, Zaporozhye, and Kryvyi Rog. I attended the opening of all these centres. They were occasions of so much joy and hope for a renewal of Jewish life. These centres were to become the thriving heart of the Jewish communities, offering Jewish cultural groups, Yiddish and Hebrew classes, social activities for young and old alike. 3 weeks ago, the Jewish population of Ukraine was about 200,000. It's very hard to know exactly how many have left since then. We estimate around a few thousand, and many of them have gone to Israel. But there are still tens of thousands who remain, including those who cannot be moved, the most vulnerable, the bed and homebound, those with disabilities, whom our partners are struggling to help wherever possible. And as I'm watching the news all the time, I have in my mind some of the elderly people that I've visited laying in their beds, not just homebound, but bedbound, waiting for their home care worker to give them some food, to clean them, to bath them. I cannot begin to imagine what has happened to those people without the support of these home care in some of these towns that have been so devastated. It breaks my heart. So now I'd like to just introduce Alex Brooks from World Jewish Relief, who will explain in a little more detail the work and impact of our programs. Thank you, Alex.
Don't know well. World Jewish Relief was initially founded in the 1930s under the name the Central British Fund of first German Jewry and then World Jewish Relief, originally to help the Jews of Europe leave and find safe passage to the UK. And we've been supporting refugees ever since. And we're proud to work both within and beyond the Jewish communities. But I thought tonight I'll just spend a few minutes talking about our work in Ukraine, where we've been working for many, many years, as in other parts of Eastern Europe, including Moldova, Belarus, Georgia, and so on. And we do a number of different things, but our key work there has been supporting the older Jewish community who live with insufficient pensions and in often dilapidated housing. And so one of the things we've been really proud to be able to do is repair homes. So you see here, this is Galina in her kitchen that had holes in the roof. She didn't have running water at all times. And so we're proud to have been able to repair more than 3,500 homes across the region. You'll be thinking, as I am, about how many of those homes will need repair again. As Rebecca just mentioned, a number of cultural activities that we're able to support within the community centres there. I also cooking lessons and arts and crafts. I also have a picture here of one of those warm homes, the tea parties that you mentioned, and other activities that we do, including supporting individuals with dementia and those that care for them, and helping to increase the knowledge and awareness of dementia across the region. We also help young people and the next generations to try and make sure that they're not in the same situation of poverty as some of their elder relatives. So we've helped thousands of people into work, into new livelihoods or into more successful livelihoods. The last few years with the pandemic has obviously been particularly tough. About a third of our graduates were back needing to look for work again, as the sectors in which they worked, hospitality and so on, were severely affected by the pandemic. But some of our activity, you'll see here a picture of people celebrating Hanukkah together via the power of Zoom. Some of our activities we adapted as much as we could during the pandemic, and activity had started to go back to face when a number of weeks ago now the terrible war began. Now, what's been fascinating in all ways for us is, as well as our work with older people, we also globally respond in times of international disaster and refugee crises. And this time, with the current situation, all the areas of our work have combined. So we're looking at an emergency situation with the older people that we support. And it's, for some of us, it's more personal. We've all been there. We've visited the wonderful cities and places. We've taken supporters there and groups of young professionals. There are partners there that we know well and participants that we know well, who we are thinking about constantly and being in touch with as many as we can. And we're responding to the crisis in a number of different ways. So for those that can, we're helping people leave. We've been involved in helping people get on buses and trains in order to leave. We've been providing cash transfers, food and medical equipment, and we're doing what we can for those that can't leave. I talked before about the older population that we generally support, many of whom are not in a position to leave the country. So we're working with our brave and incredible partners to provide support, food, medicine, psychological support. We're continuing home care as much as we can. So that's helping people who can't leave their house, that they need support with shopping or with bathing or generally to combat loneliness. So we're doing all we can with the partners that we're working with. We've also been working with the Ukrainian embassy to provide emergency food packages. And obviously, or maybe not obviously, but our work now isn't limited to the Jewish communities that we've previously supported. We're doing what we can where we can to help. Outside of Ukraine, there's also quite a lot of activity going on. So in Poland and Moldova, which are two of the countries where refugees are leaving, I read today that the UN think 2 million Ukrainians have fled the country. So we're helping our partners scale up their capacity to welcome refugees. And again, we're providing cash transfers, legal advice and food and shelter, as Rebecca mentioned. We've sent specialists from our teams to both Poland and Moldova to support our partners there, to make sure that they're doing all they can to build their capacity to assist the refugees that are fleeing. And I've actually got some pictures on the next page. And in the UK, for those of you joining from here, we already have a large refugee employment programme. We've been working with Syrians since 2015. We've been working with the Afghan cohort that started to arrive last summer. We have a very successful employment programme, and we've told the Home Office that we're ready to accept Ukrainians as they arrive as well. And we're urging the Home Office to extend humanitarian visas to Ukrainians. These pictures, oh, sorry, that's very bad tech. You can see some of these pictures, they're actually from today, from our colleagues in Poland who are assisting, as I said, partners across the border. I wanted to show in this picture the huge amount of food, baby food we see here, nappies, formula, and so on, most of which has been donated by Polish communities. And it's one of the reasons we're saying no for those very, very generous people that are asking us to collect food, nappies, clothes, and so on. There's been such an outpouring of generosity, and a lot of people want to give food and materials like this, and we're just not able to process everything. There's limited transport routes, so we want to save the ones there are for the medicines and things that are going to be really essential. And also local communities are providing currently, so that's another reason why we're doing our best to resist those very generous offers that we're receiving for food and clothes and blankets. Why are we able to do this? Why have we been able to respond so well to the Ukraine crisis appeal? And it's because of our partner network. So I said before, we've been working in Ukraine for many, many years. We now have 29 really solid, really professional, really incredible partners across the country. And where they can, and as much as they can, they're still going. They're sourcing medicine. They're working with other organizations to share the materials that they have. And there's been some stories that are heartbreaking and heartwarming to hear. We're also able to do it because of the huge outpouring from Jewish community in the UK and elsewhere. People want to help. We're able to be that vehicle for those that wish to respond. If you'll allow me just one last minute, I wanted to share something that a colleague of mine wrote. And he wrote it so well, I decided to use his words rather than try my own. He said, over the last few weeks, I felt a range of emotions. I felt sad, I felt angry, I felt disbelief, but I've also felt proud of our partners on the ground in Ukraine, staying, doing what they can for those that need it. Proud of the generosity of supporters, but I've also not felt helpless. And I've not felt helpless because we can do something about this. We can help those who need us the most, both within the Jewish community and beyond.
Thank you. I'm not sure if I'm on, back on again, but thank you, Alex, for that excellent presentation and very moving finale to it. So as Alex explained, and if you apologize, I apologize for repeating some of it, but it's the World Jewish Relief's Ukraine crisis response is focused on 3 areas. So firstly, in Ukraine, we're providing rescue and relief in country. And unbelievably, many of our 29 partners are continuing to operate in extreme circumstances, and we continue to resource and support them to do so. Many of our home care workers who have left their family with their families, and others are risking their lives to go on a daily basis to go and help the clients who need them, as I mentioned before, who are home and bedbound. They are the real heroes. They are all under immense pressure and have to adapt very rapidly to changing circumstances. We're also helping to evacuate Jews and others where and whenever we can. The logistics can be extremely complex, and the cost of evacuation per person is very high. And as you're aware, it's really only women and children. All men between the ages of 18 and 60 have to remain in country. So families are divided. Husbands have to leave the wives leave their husbands, and it is very, very tragic, and they just don't know whether they'll see them again. We are providing our partners with cash to support thousands of displaced people in country. We've heard of the almost 3 million people who have left the country, but there are some 7 million people that we reckon internally displaced that are moving from one city to another. Some of them they were displaced in 2014 when the Donetsk, the Donbas region was occupied. So they moved, and now they're on the move again. And all these people face dramatic food and hygiene and medical shortages. So we're doing what we can to send in supplies to them. And then as far as the refugees are concerned, those, as you've seen, a huge proportion have gone to Poland, where we are working with our partners at the Jewish community centers in Krakow and in Warsaw, where we've been working with them to help rebuild and renew Jewish life in Poland, and also in Moldova. So we're working with all these partners to help them build capacity and scale up their response to assist with the massive refugee crisis. We're funding safe spaces for women and children, many of whom are clearly traumatized and will need psychological support. And we've sent members of our own team from the UK, from our humanitarian response team, to Poland and to Moldova to give them guidance, because they are not trained or equipped to deal with such enormous problems and crisis. And finally, in the UK, as you will no doubt be aware, yesterday the British government announced its Homes for Ukraine scheme. And we're working very closely with the government, including Lord Harrington, who is just newly appointed as the Minister for Refugees, about how we can best assist them. We've worked with them in 2015 with Lord Harrington when he was Minister for Refugees, well, Syrian refugees, and he was very thrilled that we are on board again with him. We had a meeting with him the other day, and he was very praiseworthy of the input of World Jewish Relief. He said that of all the organizations he worked with, we were truly impressed. He was truly impressed with our professionalism and our ability to provide services that other organizations were not offering. So under this scheme, as many of you will know, but forgive me for repeating, people will be able to nominate a named individual to stay with them or in another property for 6 months rent-free. And in addition to registering on the official website, the government website, which, as I gather this evening, has received over 100,000 registrations since it went live yesterday morning, World Jewish Relief has also set up a dedicated web page for people to register their interest in hosting a refugee in their home. And there is a link, perhaps, I think, Elliot, could you put that in the chat? It's worldjewishRelief.org/homes for refugees. And in the past 24 hours, World Jewish Relief has received 566 registrations from within the Jewish community, which is really heartwarming. But one of the difficulties of this scheme is matching hosts with refugees, because you have to have a named refugee that you want to bring in to the country and to support. And in many cases, most people don't know who they want to bring in. They don't have a direct contact. So we are working to try and match potential hosts with potential refugees. We're in contact with our partners in Poland, where many of the refugees find themselves, and in Moldova, as I mentioned. And we are asking them or informing them to let people know that World Jewish Relief is an organization that will encourage them. We've set up our own website, a web page in Russian. We're about to do it in Ukrainian for any Ukrainian who wishes to come to England and would looking for a home. And there is as well a website sort of, it'll be on our website. I'm not going to give you the link because I shouldn't think it's that relevant now. So when people arrive, assuming they've settled in with a family, what do? So they will be provided by the government education for their children, public services, hospitals, doctors. The government will allow them to facilitate through local authorities all those services. Something that World Jewish Relief set up in 2015 in response to the Syrian refugee crisis was a program called STEP. This is our Specialist Training and Employment Program. And with funding from the Jewish community, the EU and the Home Office, World Jewish Relief has assisted over 1,000 resettled refugees in the UK since 2015. The STEP program, is currently the largest provider of refugee employment support to resettled refugees in the UK. STEP supports all resettled refugees, regardless of their proximity to the labour market, and helps them develop skills and identify the opportunities they need to secure sustainable employment. And the aim is to enable clients to become economically independent and self-reliant. Over the coming weeks and months, we will expand STEP to provide Ukrainian refugees with English language skills, one-to-one assistance in finding work or setting up their own businesses. Maimonides conceived of 8 levels of tzedakah, and the highest of those is giving to someone to enable them to become self-sufficient. This is very much at the heart of what World Jewish Relief does, and in particular with this STEP program. We want to break the cycle of poverty so people can support themselves and their families and become valued members of society. Now, clearly, to run all these programs requires vast sums. To date, through the generosity of Anglo Jewelry, we've raised approximately £3.6 million through our Ukraine crisis appeal. But we've also spent around 2.5 million to date. We're not raising the money not to spend it. We need to spend it, and we will spend it wisely and efficiently and effectively. Our updated fundraising target, because of the crisis that is ongoing, is now £10 million. And this reflects the growing scale of the need. We desperately need funds to keep providing support, which is literally life-saving. So I'm asking you this evening to please be as generous as you can. You can donate via the link in the chat function, which is worldjewishrelief.org/Ukraine crisis. I think that's gone in the chat now. Has Elliot put it in? Yes, thank you. And also, if you know of anybody that wants to offer a home or host a home, look at the website as well. I'm happy to answer questions now from anybody. If you want to unmute yourselves, wave your hand, put your little yellow hand up in the box, or if there are any questions, please put them in the chat as well, and I'll see if I can respond to any of those. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We do have a question from Aviva Wilford. Can you shed light on who your partners are?
Yes. So, well, one of our main partners for many, many years, traditional partners, is the American Joint Distribution Committee, the JDC. And they have programs on the ground all over the world, actually. Where their motto used to be, wherever is a Jew is in need, they will be there. So we partner with them with a lot of our programs. They help run the Cheseds, which I mentioned earlier. Other partners, there's an organization called Jews for Ukraine, which provides disability programs for people with disabilities. We have partners, Aging for Age Ukraine. There's a partner called Kriya Vita, which is founded by a woman who was in a wheelchair. I met her many, many years ago, and she set up small projects to help people access taxis and buses, because we take all these things for granted in the UK, but they weren't able to use a wheelchair to get into a taxi. So we funded her. I mean, it's grown enormously since then. But so there's a number of partners like that who we work very closely with.
Right, we're now open for questions. Either raise your virtual hand or wave.
There is one in the chat here. Are you still supporting the Afghan refugees, especially with STEP and rehousing? Well, this is a very important question. Sadly, the Afghan refugees that came here, many of them are still in the hotels that they were put in when they first arrived. And there's been a real difficulty. It's not our responsibility, but it has been a problem. So what we have been doing, we've recognized that these women and children in the main should not be just sitting in their hotel rooms. So we have set up programs in the hotels where they are, where we send in teams of counselors, of teachers to work with the children, with the women, because in many of the cases, the men go out and find work because that's what's accepted in their culture, and the women are left behind. And we want to help the women retrain, get confidence to be able to access the labour market as and when they're able to. So yes, we are. And in Afghanistan itself, we have managed to send in, we've got a large, I mean, as you know, there are 12 million people probably starving to death in Afghanistan. We don't hear about it because of the Ukraine crisis, but that's still ongoing. And we are very supportive of that. We had an emergency Afghan appeal a number of months ago, and using those funds to help sending in food into Afghanistan? Thank you for that question.
Danny H. You'll need to unmute.
Hi there, thank you very much. My question is, on what timescale do you envisage the first influx of refugees coming over?
That's something I really can't answer. I was listening, apparently Rob Rinder, I heard, is in Poland at the moment on the border there. And he was saying, I heard it this afternoon, that the welcome committees and the Polish government and the Polish voluntary civic society have, as you know, have set up fantastic schemes and very welcoming. And they've now got it sort of within 2 to 3 weeks, they've got their act together. So they provide very good immediate sort of 2 or 3 nights care for people. But where at these depots, there are huge French flags and huge German flags flying, so that if anybody wants to go to Germany or to France, they can go to those areas. Apparently, there are no British flags. So at the moment, the people wanting to come to England or even thinking about coming to England are not being directed or posted to anyone. So this is a problem that we are trying to help the government address. We're very mindful of this, and we bring all these issues to them, and hopefully they will deal with that. But and obviously, with all situations, we've learned from the Syrian refugees, most refugees will want to stay as close to their homeland as possible. With the Syrian refugees, many of them are in Jordan, many of them are in Turkey. We've been supporting them there. They don't, they want the opportunity to go back. And it's the same with many of these. They're hoping that they can go back. Who knows? I mean, we don't know how long. Nobody knows. There's only one person who knows how long this is going to go on for, and I believe that's Vladimir Putin. It's all in his hands, but it's difficult to gauge. I don't know. Is the answer.
Right. Any other questions? Most people in Europe speak languages much better than we do. Do you know how much of the Jewish community and the general community have English as their second language?
Well, so, okay, it's not their second language. So many Ukrainians, Odessa, Mariupol, that whole region, their first language is actually Russian, and their second language is Ukrainian. Yeah. And they will always believe, many of them felt very Russian inside. A lot of them now are obviously turning against that, and they are becoming, this has actually driven them to become much more nationalistic and much more Ukrainian. As far, I would say the younger community, the younger members of the communities, the Jewish and the non-Jewish communities have English. It's the older people that haven't, those that, under communism, many of them, I mean, I've been there and I've enjoyed speaking Yiddish. I mean, my Yiddish is very broken, but I've had wonderful conversations in broken Yiddish with many of the Holocaust survivors and the elder, and sung Yiddish songs at the Jewish community centers. So Yiddish is the second language for many of them, possibly their first even, actually. But as you've seen, I mean, obviously the interviews that we see on the television are people that can speak English, but I would say that the young, certainly the children, pick it up very quickly if they come here. But we will be running English language classes for people so that they can integrate and assimilate into British society as quickly as possible.
Right. And another issue, I don't know if you've addressed this, the level of COVID in Eastern Europe is much higher than here, or at least I think it is. What precautions are being taken with the populations that are fleeing the country?
Well, I don't know if the levels are higher, but of COVID are higher, but certainly the levels of vaccination are far lower, far lower. And in Ukraine, from before this crisis, we were talking about levels between 19 and 25% of the population had COVID vaccines. Clearly, this is something that most people are not talking about too much. It's very possible that the refugees, when they get to Poland and Moldova and other countries, are being jabbed. I would hope that they are. I think at the moment, really, though, it's one of the least of their problems, really, if you think of everything else they're facing. You know, you've got people you've probably seen coming over requiring chemotherapy, cancer treatment, all sorts of other treatments, more emergent, more urgent than dealing with COVID.
Yeah. And could I ask you about how prepared World Jewish Relief is if the war were to spread beyond the boundaries of Ukraine? There is talk that it could spread in the first instance to countries which are not members of NATO, for example, Moldova, Georgia, and so on. Would you be able to cope with that, or are you at the limit now?
No, look, we'd cope. We would cope. We'd have to go out and we would ask for more support and more funding. And I believe that the community is extremely generous and will support. We are, you mentioned Moldova and Georgia, and those are the two countries that I'm very fearful for. We are making sure that, you know, they have documents in order, passports in order, should they need to evacuate. Who knows, but I do agree they are very vulnerable countries. I mean, I personally think Poland, I'd be surprised if Putin dare attack Poland. He might just want to test NATO, but he's got other countries that he could go to. And we are working, we have partners in Georgia. I've been to Georgia, I've been to Moldova. We've got a little, you know, Jewish communities there, the same as in Ukraine. Moldova, many of you might not be aware, is the poorest country in Europe. So for them to be helping refugees, they need huge support from the West to be able to finance their support. Their willing is there, but you know, they definitely need support, not only from organizations like World Jewish Relief, but from governments in the West, in America.
And you also operate in Russia, don't you?
Well, Belarus, we have got some programs in Belarus, which is obviously tricky at the moment. We're still supporting organizations there. That's a problem. We have not been working really in Russia. The American Joint have a lot of programs in Russia with the Jewish communities there, but we haven't. It was difficult to work there. We had enough to do in Ukraine, and we felt that Ukraine was really the quantities and the degree of vulnerability amongst the Jewish community was very high there, and in Moldova. There's also another little piece of land, a strip of land between Moldova and Ukraine called Transnistria, which some of you may be aware of, and I visited that, and that is a relic of the Soviet Union. It has not been recognized by anybody. It should be part of Romania, but it's a breakaway bit of land. And we have as well, there's a small Jewish community there in two of the cities, in Tiraspol and Ribnitsia, I believe it's called. And they're very vulnerable. They're extremely vulnerable, and they could be a launching pad for the Russian army, because they don't even have to take the western part of Ukraine. You know, they could go in there and launch missiles from there to Moldova very easily. So that is a big problem. Looking at the war in Ukraine, you know, Odessa obviously is a big target now. And we all, you know, most of us, I would imagine most of the people listening have some connection to these towns, Odessa and Kherson, and whether it's family, parents or grandparents or great-grandparents, these were the towns and the cities that were in the Pale of Settlement, where most Ashkenazi Jewry came from. And so I think that adds another level of empathy for the Jewish community around the world, and in Israel as well. You know, we do feel very close to what's happening, not just on the Jewish community, but also, you know, the non-Jewish people who are there.
Yeah. And of course, it's not just Poland which could be on the firing line, it's also the Baltic states. And there's a sliver of land which everyone recognizes, which is Kaliningrad.
Yes, Yes.
And that could also be a launching pad.
Yeah, yeah. And obviously Hungary could be, but that's beyond most of our ability to forecast what's going to happen.
Yeah. And what is going to happen to the people who simply can't leave Ukraine, because they're old and frail, and if their carers emigrate or something happens to them? Other than World Jewish Relief, is there anyone else who can help these people?
Well, there are other organizations that are working there. Chabad have got a presence in nearly every city in Ukraine. We work with them in some of the towns closely. We've got good relationships with many of the rabbis, and we will endeavor to do whatever we can to carry on funding and providing support for these most vulnerable people. It is just heartbreaking, and not everybody is, or not all the carers are leaving. Some are staying behind. We will probably definitely have to increase salaries to encourage them to do this work. So, and if it's not the regular carer, we'll have to find other people. But I think, it's like even here when we were all in lockdown, people rally round at times of need. And you don't have to be a dedicated carer. You can be a neighbor, you can be a friend, you can be a child. People are supporting each other. And I just hope that will continue. The problem is being able to get the supplies in, because I can foresee, Kiev being laid siege to, just like Mariupol. I can see that happening. And then possibly even the whole of Ukraine, because they're working. If you look at the map, I should have brought a map with, but Russia is occupying more and more of the periphery, the borders. Yes. And the pressure on the West, for this no-fly zone, there's going to be huge pressure there once if he starts targeting Lviv and other countries on the Western borders.
Right. Does anyone else have any questions? I'd have thought some of you would have had a family who were there or come from these areas.
We have actually had a number of people contact us who have had family and desperately asking us to help them come out. I mean, one person in particular rang me 2 weeks ago. She spoke to her cousin who is in Odessa, and she said, I think she's having a heart attack. And this is an elderly cousin and a woman, and we were able, with quite a bit of effort, we were able to get her out. We got her in touch with our local chesed that we work with, and we were able to get this individual out. And there have been a handful of cases that we've been able to support individuals, because of our close relationship on the ground. So, we've done that.
And when people do leave and they come to Britain, will Jewish Relief be dealing with them, or will it then be the responsibility of local authorities and the government?
So it will be primarily local authorities, but we will literally step in with our programs. So we've built up over the last 7 years, since 2015, we've built a very, very good working relationship with local authorities, housing associations in Halifax. And we started in Bradford with a pilot scheme, but Newcastle, Halifax, Bradford, Leeds, all over particularly in the north. We've also set up a scheme now in London, in Camden. So we've got a very, very good working relationship with them. And it's up to local authorities to take in the people, or local individuals in those authorities. So we will then be working very closely with them to develop these, to expand our existing programs, which have been so successful, really successful. We've got people working in trained up and working now for Waitrose and in Timpson's, the shoe people, the repair so many Sainsbury's, and it's amazing how much we've been able to help people find work. Some of it was work placements, but these refugees, the Ukrainian refugees, are going to be, it's not like asylum seekers. They are allowed to work in England. They won't have to wait. They'll be allowed to work wherever they want to and wherever they are capable. So we will endeavour to match people with work placements. Up to 3, they're allowed to come for up to 3 years, and then it'll be reviewed.
But actually about Jewish identity, you gave a figure of 200,000, and that's at the upper level. 40,000 is probably the number who would answer Jewish on a census form. There are others who are Jewish but have non-Jewish partners. There are others further removed who, under the law of return in Israel, would be eligible to go there because they have a grandparent. When they come here, will they want to identify with the Jewish community, or will some of them not want to do so?
Look, it'll be a mixture. It really will be a mixture. And, some of them, as you say rightly, there's about, I've heard it's about 50,000 who really identify as being Jewish. And many of those have become quite religious, want to keep kashrut, etc. So they will definitely veer towards the Jewish community centres or synagogues, etc. And they will make themselves known. There's no question. And hopefully we'll be able to match them with homes in Golders Green or Edgware, where people keep kosher and Shema Shabbat or whatever. We will endeavour to match people. As far as the others are concerned, we will make it known that there are Jewish community. It's up to them, really. It really is up to them. We will encourage if they want to be, but it really is up to individuals as to how committed they want to be and how involved. But the figure of 200,000, and you say, is actually pretty genuine. I mean, when I first went to Ukraine, we were talking about 350,000 Jews. Many of them have since gone to Israel and other places. But so I would expect that 200,000 is a pretty fair assessment and a fair, figure. These are people, as you say, we have to remember that under communism, people were not allowed to practice their Judaism. So they lost it. They just lost everything. But I've met many, many young people over the years that I've traveled there, and also to Poland, the same sort of story, but more so in Ukraine, where they've said, we've been there on a Shabbat and we've lit candles, or they've learned, or they started to learn about Pesach. And one girl said to me, I remember going to my grandmother's house at Easter time, and there would be a whole long table and all the family would be there, and we would be eating these funny crackers. And, she didn't know why, but she remembers this tradition being handed down. So that's the level of Jewishness that there was. And through our Jewish community centres and through all the work of Chabad and other organisations over the past 20 to 30 years, they know what it is now. They've understood, they've learned about their Jewish culture, they've learned about Chagim, they've learned about Jewish family laws and rituals, etc. And so they've learned an awful lot. It's not their fault that they married out or whatever, their partners are not Jewish. So yeah, it's been wonderful, and yet so sad to see that, all that has hopefully one day we'll be able to restore that. We don't know.
Danny, if you can unmute, yes, go ahead. Can you unmute yourself?
Oh, sorry about that. If I may be permitted to ask, are you working with other Jewish organisations? Because it's more than us as individuals, but we've made an application to house any refugees that are basically, the question is, are you working with other Jewish organisations?
Here in the UK?
Here in the UK. I mean, we've applied to our synagogue, but are there other organisations that we can apply to?
Well, no, the best thing, so we're working now, it's obviously it's all very fresh and very new. It's literally just happened. So it's an ongoing development, but we're working very closely with the JLC, the Jewish Leadership Council, and the Board of Deputies, and they are going to be signposting people to us and the government website to register their interests. I mean, that's really the main way to do it. And even if you register on our website, you have to register on the official government website as well. But we want to keep a closer eye on things, and so that we're able to match people better, and you know, that's it. But so it is. I mean, we've got the support of all the synagogues, whether it's Masorti United Synagogue, the Office of the Chief Rabbi, across the board, the Progressive, the Liberals, are all sort of pooling all their information towards us. I've just seen here a message, thank you, from Barbara Lurie about the Bournemouth community. Thank you, willing to take in refugees. So that's noted. Thank you very much.
Yes, and I was at a regional meeting of the Board of Deputies, and there were people from the north also willing to take people in.
Yeah, no, it's amazing. It's really wonderful. I mean, it is, you know, the commitment for 6 months is extraordinary as well. I mean, that's not going to always be easy for everybody, but the government has stipulated that it's a minimum of 6 months.
Yes, but they are willing to pay. It's going to be £350 a month.
£350 a month per person, yes. And then the local authorities are going to get £10,000 or something per. I'm not sure how that works exactly, but obviously the local authorities, in order to provide health and education services, etc., full services to an individual, they're going to be getting a large.
That's right, because the £350 doesn't cover food or other things, and that will be for the local authority or others to provide.
Yes.
There's a hand up, but it's not Barbara Lurie, it's a gentleman there. So could you unmute yourself and say? Right, go ahead.
Good evening, Spencer. Good evening, Linda. My name's Simon Lurie. You may remember me, Spencer.
Of course.
I was recently appointed chair, Linda, of the Bournemouth Hebrew congregation, and it's through me that the offer from the Bournemouth community is placed. What we have uniquely in Bournemouth is probably many hotels, and we will speak with the hotels if you're having a small community arrangement, whereby a group of persons from Ukraine or other countries around the area need accommodation and want to remain as a community, a Jewish community. The Orthodox community is particularly keen to support this. I've discussed it with our community and we're willing to take action if you'd let me know. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. That's absolutely wonderful, and it's a brilliant idea. So yes, I will. So you have registered this on the website, did you? And there's a little message box. Did you put all this in?
I spoke with Janice, and she's.
Oh, you've spoken to Janice. Well, she's the person.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, that's great. Once Janice has got the information, Janice Lepatkin is the person that set up. We brought in 2015 in response to the Syrian refugee crisis, and she has been. Well, she was made an MBE in the last year, because of the efforts that she's done in helping to absorb and find work and etc. for refugees and asylum seekers. So she's first class.
And of course, most of the hotels in Bournemouth are close to where the Jewish community is located.
Correct.
Yes.
Right. Any final question? No. Well, in that case, I'd like to thank Linda for her presentation on the situation in Ukraine and her advice on how we can all help. You'll be able to access a recording of this session on the Edgeware US YouTube channel immediately after we finish tonight. Our next session in the Edgeware Adult Education Programme will be in 2 weeks' time on Tuesday, the 29th of March at 8 p.m, when I shall be interviewing the world famous cantor at Fifth Avenue, New York, Joseph Malavani, who was at Edgware US from 1968 to 1973. You may also like to know that on Tuesday the 24th of May, we shall have a session in the next biennial programme on Jewish Belarus over 700 years, cultural heritage as a driver for social change in the former Soviet Union by Deborah Bonner of the Together Plan. If you wish to catch up on any of our talks in past sessions, you can find them on our Edgware US YouTube channel. More information about our adult education programme can be found on our website, www.edgwareu.com. Alternatively, contact our office@edgwareu.com, and ask to be placed on the circulation list for the adult education programme. Thank you for participating this evening, and I hope you will contribute generously to the World Jewish Relief Appeal.
Thank you so much.